Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The new episode of the Kind Mind podcast is called Parenting Your Inner Child, and it mostly deals with this idea that so much of our behavior is reflexive. We might think of our inner child as an image that we carry, a memory of our younger self in the old world. It is also the current living imprint as our nervous system, which mostly coded long ago all of its needs for safety and survival. Consider that the brain doesn't finish developing until 25 years old. So what feels normal can be unconscious. For example, a small child making emotional bids for connection and that going unreceived or inconsistently received by a caregiver, that small child's not going to have the brain faculty yet to narrate that or reflect on that. So they're not going to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and form an avoidant attachment style here, or an anxious or insecure attachment style. Now, as a therapist, I've gotten to learn a lot about myself because for decades, my patients or my clients invite me into this sacred work where I get to collaborate with them to try to understand and deconstruct socially, biologically, psychologically, what these behaviors mean, what these patterns mean, why they feel cyclical, why they feel normal but harmful. And it's one thing if like you have debilitating depression or you're having panic attacks, or you know very clearly how a severe trauma has affected you, and that it like rises to meet criteria for psychiatric disorder. But there is such a spectrum of distress and emotional pain that can go undetected. So just consider some very common themes in life and think of how different it can be behaviorally for people with different inner child work. Like you take something like communication, unhealthy habits like lying or secrecy, or lack of transparency. It's easy to look at that through a moral lens, but what did truth mean for that person growing up? Did it just mean that they were going to be punished? Was there room for mistakes? Sometimes families tell me or parents tell me when I'm working with children, my kid lies and, they're being so bad. And I'll ask them to track or document the lies and bring it back to me. And many times I'll find out they're only lying in the context of shame. And the parenting style is really about them. They're angry that the child is behaving this way, and the child learns, like, well, it's better to cover it up or deflect or to blame. Or time. People procrastinate. People are always late. And it's such a habit. I've been like this too with being late. It's like it doesn't matter if there's traffic or not traffic. I tend to procrastinate. But what did time mean for a person growing up? Was time spacious? Was time peaceful? Was time urgent? Different communities, time means different things, different cultures, and different socioeconomic classes have to contend with time differently. Time is privilege or time is luxury. What about attention and time, or attention and restlessness or impulsivity? There's such an explosion of ADHD, and sometimes medications help, but sometimes they can, even when they do help, they're not necessarily addressing the suffering. Like, what did stillness mean for that person? As a meditator and a mindfulness teacher, sometimes it's hard to teach people to close their eyes and be still because that means something different for everyone's inner child. What was silence? Was silence peaceful? Growing up, was silence a weapon? Was silence a form of punishment? Sometimes people can learn very well as long as they're moving, but moving might have meant freedom, might have meant peace for somebody else. Pain. Pain is so subjective in the research. Mood changes subjective pain levels. Expectation changes pain levels. There have been studies with placebos where some people are given the real pain medication, others are given the placebo medication, and if they're both told this is going to really help you, they get similar pain reduction. People can be given a pain medication and told this is for something else, and they report no relief from their pain. But how did we experience pain? A lot of my physical pain or injuries were in the context of playing in nature, climbing trees, playing sports. But if somebody's physical pain came, mostly from abuse, mostly from harm, it's going to mean something totally different to their psyche. Now, the other really interesting thing, if you want to get curious with this kind of work, is to think about our so-called positive traits. Somebody asked me recently, but doesn't trauma sometimes cultivate some of our virtues? Certainly, we build resilience from facing adversity, but I would caution people to consider that some virtues are like faux virtues, and they're reframed as virtuous to help our inner child cope with past experiences. Like a good clue with this is when we're describing ourselves, do we use a word like just? I'm just easygoing. Is it that? Is it like just as if like you flip a coin and nature decides if you're going to be easygoing or not? The just kind of is a barrier to further exploration, because maybe somebody's easygoing, or maybe they learned long ago that if you express your preferences, you get beat down, or you get punished, or you get bullied at school. I'm just independent. Is it that, or perhaps somebody learns, anytime they asked for help, it didn't matter. It wasn't well received. And maybe something like empathy. I'm just an empath. We hear that a lot. But it's also possible that people learn as a survival skill to be tuned in to the emotions, to caretake their parents' emotions. If you have a parent with alcoholism or substance use disorder, an abusive parent, a child's going to learn pretty quickly. If I can predict their mood, if I could soothe their mood, this is called parentification. When a child's being parented, to really take care of the parent. Sometimes parents, their discipline is based on their emotions. I don't like that you're behaving this way, therefore I'm punishing you. Or a child has to take care of their siblings early, or doesn't have freedom to play because of poverty or something else. But in any of those kind of cases, a child's probably going to learn how to be sensitive to the moods, the changes in other people's affect, and it's going to be like a superpower. But is it authentically their virtue? So one way to understand this is, does this pattern light me up? Because if we're really easygoing as like a quality that we value, we will be energized by that. We'll be peaceful from it. But sometimes when I'm working with clients, it's like they name it that because that's a little bit easier than to say, I feel like a pushover in this relationship. I feel like a doormat. My passive behavior builds up into passive aggression. It's easier to reframe it sometimes. But if you have courage to look inward and deconstruct some of this, we can transform and we can be a lot happier. And the real amazing thing about this shadow work is it's pretty easy to see someone else's shadow that they cast behind them. That's why it's called shadow work. And being able to see other people's complexes that don't serve them will actually blind someone to their own, because they'll think, because I can see, oh, I see what they're doing there. I know why they lie. I know why that person's secretive. They feel as though they would be able to detect that in themselves. So the real question is, what about my childhood feels normal now? And then you can see how this actually scales out to groupthink, to our identities and cultures and religions and societies and how countries behave given what's in the shadows. So I hope you can check out the episode, Parenting Your Inner Child, on the Kind Mind podcast. Thanks.